News had just broken out about Pastor Charles Jenkins, and you won't believe how shocking it really was. For years, people had looked at him as one of the strongest, most energetic voices in gospel music and ministry. But suddenly, a health update came that no one expected. Fans were left in confusion, church members were shaken, and the gospel community was stunned. Let me tell you, this was not a small matter. It wasn't a passing cold or just exhaustion. This was something deeper that forced even his closest supporters to pause and ask, what really happened to Charles Jenkins? And this is how the story started to unfold, piece by piece, leaving more questions than answers. Charles Jenkins had always been more than a pastor. He was a gospel artist recognized around the world, a songwriter whose songs were sung in churches, big and small, and a leader who touched lives through both words and music. His songs like Awesome in War were not just popular tunes, they became movements. People sang them in worship, at conferences, and even across international borders. That was why his health update hit so hard. The man who always gave hope to others, who preached strength and victory, was now the one in need of prayer. And here's the shocking part. Nobody saw it coming. For months, his online presence looked normal. He posted, he preached, and he still seemed active in ministry. His energy appeared untouched. That was exactly why the health news spread like fire when it finally came out. Supporters were blindsided. This is where it gets interesting because the first whispers started not from him, but from quiet church circles, where people noticed small changes, small pauses in his usual schedule. At first, many dismissed it as just another rumor. In the world of gospel music, gossip often made small matters look big. But the truth was waiting, and when it came, it shocked everyone. Official confirmation came from close sources who revealed that Jenkins was facing a serious health challenge. It wasn't something light, and it was not the kind of news fans expected to hear. According to insiders, medical professionals had told him to step back, reduce his public life, and focus on recovery. Suddenly, his tours, performances, and ministry events were either canceled or postponed. What makes this story different? Charles Jenkins had never been the kind of leader who slowed down. People were used to seeing him everywhere, on stage, online, and in the pulpit. And now, just like that, he had to step back. The craziest part was how sudden it all felt, as if destiny took an unexpected turn, changing the rhythm of a man who had always been unstoppable. The reaction to the news was immediate and overwhelming. Fans rushed to social media, posting messages of love and prayers under the hashtags that quickly began trending. Hashtag Pray for Charles Jenkins and hashtag Charles Jenkins. Testimonies poured in from people who said his songs had carried them through their darkest nights. They shared how Awesome reminded them of God's power when they felt weak, and how War gave them courage when life was breaking them down. But here is the shocking part. While the world was showing him love, the update itself left out the most important detail. No one knew what exactly he was battling. There was no clear diagnosis shared, no explanation of the sickness or struggle. And that mystery only created more talk, more whispers, and more questions that people desperately wanted answered. Some believed it was a physical illness brought on by years of nonstop ministry. Others thought it was the result of stress and pressure, the kind that slowly eats away at even the strongest people. And this is where it gets interesting. There were also those who said the silence meant something more. They wondered if Charles had been hiding his struggle for months, choosing to keep a strong face for his followers even when his body was breaking down. Let me tell you, this silence was not ordinary. In fact, it became one of the most talked about parts of the story because the unknown often feels scarier than the truth. What made things even more intense was that Charles Jenkins had always been known for his openness and authenticity. Unlike many leaders who kept their personal struggles away from the public, he had built trust by being real with his audience. He admitted his doubts, his challenges, and his faith battles. So when he suddenly went quiet about his health, People knew something serious was happening. And the craziest part was the mystery around his condition made his supporters worry even more. Because when strong leaders fall silent, the weight of that silence is louder than words. Still, despite the unanswered questions, there was one thing nobody could deny. His influence was too powerful for people to stay quiet. Pastors, gospel artists, and leaders from across the country began to speak up, posting messages of encouragement, calling him a warrior, a fighter, and a man whose faith would not fail. Fans clung to those words, holding on to hope. But here is the shocking part. Behind all the love, behind all the encouragement, there was a growing fear. What if his condition was worse than anyone realized? What if this health crisis changed his future forever? As more days passed, the story of Charles Jenkins moved from being just about his health to something much bigger. People began to see his situation as a reflection of the hidden battles many leaders face. Let me tell you, the life of a pastor was never as easy as it looked. It wasn't only about preaching powerful sermons on Sunday. This is how it really worked. Monday could mean visiting the sick, Tuesday, counseling troubled couples, Wednesday, sitting through endless board meetings, and the rest of the week traveling, mentoring, or recording. And when you added gospel music tours, studio hours, and public appearances, the weight became almost unbearable. But here is the shocking part. Most of this pressure was invisible to the public eye. Leaders carried it silently, smiling on the outside while their bodies and minds grew weaker inside. What makes this story different is that Charles Jenkins had been one of the few who seemed unshakable. He had balanced music and ministry with the kind of energy people admired. But destiny took an unexpected turn, reminding everyone that even the strongest voices could reach a breaking point. The craziest part was how his battle forced the church and gospel industry to look at itself in the mirror. Were fans and congregations expecting too much? Were they pushing their leaders beyond human limits, demanding they be superhuman, when in truth they were only human like everyone else? Conversations began spreading beyond his church. Blogs, gospel forums, and social media threads asked hard questions. Why were pastors and gospel artists pressured to give everything without rest? Why was self-care treated like weakness instead of wisdom? And this is where it gets interesting. Jenkins' silence and his struggle became a turning point. He was not just fighting for himself anymore. His condition exposed a bigger truth that many tried to ignore. Studies even showed that pastors faced high levels of stress-related illnesses, heart problems, depression, and burnout. And suddenly, Charles Jenkins was living proof of those numbers. But here is the shocking part. Rather than let his story be a warning filled with fear, Jenkins himself started shaping it into a testimony. Even as people worried about his health, he responded with faith-filled words. He didn't deny his struggle, but he also didn't let despair take over. He spoke about storms being part of life and about God's presence being real even in the middle of those storms. Let me tell you, these words spread faster than the rumors. Fans reposted his statements, calling them powerful, while artists said he wasn't just preaching through songs anymore. He was living them in real time. Even though the health update shook everyone, Charles Jenkins showed that his spirit was still strong. He reminded his followers that victory was not about ignoring reality, but about facing it with faith. Let me tell you, that message touched people in a way no song ever could. His battle was no longer just about him. It became a rallying cry for thousands who were struggling in their own lives. People with sickness, depression, family problems, or financial troubles looked at Jenkins and said, if he can hold on, then so can I. But here's the shocking part. While he encouraged others, he also made it clear that even leaders had limits. He spoke about the importance of slowing down, resting, and of learning that self-care was not weakness, but wisdom. This is how the story turned from heartbreaking into inspiring. Charles Jenkins showed the gospel world that strength was not about never falling. It was about standing up even when the weight felt too heavy. The craziest part was that his health battle became bigger than music, bigger than ministry, and bigger than the stage. It opened the door to conversations people usually avoided. Were we pushing our pastors too hard? Were we valuing performances more than the health of the people behind them? And this is where it gets interesting. Jenkins's story forced churches, fans, and the entire gospel industry to think about change. Destiny took an unexpected turn, not only for Jenkins, but for everyone watching. His life became a reminder that leaders were human too, that they needed rest, balance, and support just like anyone else. And what makes this story different is that it showed weakness could actually become a source of strength. By sharing his struggle, he gave people permission to face their own battles honestly. Fans realized that Charles Jenkins' legacy was not just his songs, but also his example of resilience, honesty, and faith in the middle of crisis. So while questions about his future in music and ministry still remain, one thing was clear. This moment would be remembered as more than just a health update. It would be remembered as the time Charles Jenkins turned his hardest trial into his greatest testimony. And you won't believe how his story, even in weakness, continued to lift up countless others with hope and courage.